Life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you wish, but you only spend it once. That is a quote by Lillian Dickinson. Welcome to Trina Talk. This is the podcast where guests share their stories of pursuing their passions, living a fulfilled life, and empowering others. Each week, I talk with inspiring leaders, business owners, and people with amazing stories from around the world in unscripted conversations as they share their successes and failures. This podcast is all about empowering you to keep striving in your personal and professional life. I am your host, Trina L. Martin. Welcome to episode 163. The topic of this week's episode is Breathe Deep. My guest this week is Nate Rifkin. Nate Rifkin has prospered by combining ancient mystical practices with modern strategies for living. When he began his journey, Nate was suicidal and drank alcohol every morning. He dropped out of college, went broke, bankrupt, and even worked on street corners waving around a sign. However, Nate learned a little-known spiritual discipline that helped him transform his thoughts, emotions, financial life, and even his love life. Today, he's thriving as a writer and just published his first book. Hi, Nate. Welcome to Trina Talk.
Thank you, Trina. I'm honored to be here.
I'm honored to speak with you because you have an amazing story. But before we get into that story, how I like to start off is I ask all my guests who you are and how you come to be the Nate that you are today.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I am a Taoist. I practice from the Taoist spiritual tradition. I'm a proud husband, and I'm an author, and I'm someone who had to crawl through his own personal hell to get there. So that's how I'd put it. And I mean, then that could definitely segue into my story because there's definitely a story to go along with that.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to get right into the story. So, you're familiar with the show. So, I like not only to hear people's successes, but, we all have failures to go along with our story and our journey. So just kind of take us on that journey, because I don't want to give it away by saying reading your bio. So just go ahead and just lead us into that.
Yeah, I'd love to. And yes, I will have a fairly large dish of failure to serve up that, that we could all learn from. But the story really begins when I was a kid, because I grew up in a family where everyone was very emotionally shut down. And everyone was very kind of cold and distant. My father didn't want kids, and he didn't want to participate in raising kids. And I was a pretty angry, fussy child growing up. And as I got older, I got more depressed because I turned all that anger like inward on myself. And as a really awkward teenager, very few superficial friendships. And I didn't care about school, didn't care about grades. And I just hated my life. But I thought to myself, well, if I go to college, maybe things will be different because I'll be starting over in a new place. That was my hope. And I really believed that. So I actually did get into college. I went to UMass Amherst in Massachusetts, giant school, like huge campus. It's the size of a town. And I show up in the middle of the sea of people. And I immediately knew I was so wrong about being able to start over, because I was still that same awkward, shy, depressed kid. I mean, I was technically an adult, but I still felt like a kid. And and in college, I was actually even more miserable. I didn't care about my studies, so my grades started like slipping off a cliff. Wasn't making friends, could not get a date to save my life. And I was just looking at all these other people that I thought were so much more happy and well adjusted than I was, which, is kind of like the grass is greener thing, but it was somewhat true, because there were a lot of people who just came from a much more functional background than I was. So I started thinking to myself, well, what do I want to do? The only thing that I really enjoyed at that point was working out, lifting weights in the gym. And I wanted to be a business owner, an entrepreneur of some sort. I didn't know what, but that was my dream. So I started thinking, do I really want to pay to be miserable? Is anyone going to ask me for a college degree if I'm like an entrepreneur of some sort? They're going to like, hey, where's your diploma there, buddy? Probably not. So I decided to drop out. After 3 semesters, I dropped out. I said goodbye to nobody. The only person who probably noticed I was even gone was my roommate, because he probably came in like after the break and saw someone else there next to him. I have no idea. I've actually, it's funny. I just realized this was years ago. This is like over 15 years ago. And yeah, I don't even know what happened to anyone at that college. I was never in touch with anyone. So, but after I dropped out, I was kind of excited because, hey, I'm gonna be a business owner, right? And I decided, all right, I'm gonna sell, like, I have an internet-based business. I'm going to sell health and fitness products. I teamed up with my older brother because he's an expert on yoga. We're going to sell like DVDs on yoga. He'd do all the teaching. I'd handle the business. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. I funded it with my own credit cards, and we had some hit or miss success. And that segued into more misses in terms of success. Like I had a knack for writing and marketing and advertising, but I had zero business sense or personal finance sense. I mean, I was in my early 20s, so I wasn't the brightest apple in the bin. And I started to go deeper and deeper into debt, which got really scary when I started maxing out my credit cards. And I do the whole thing where you get the bill in the mail, and I just kind of ignore it and kind of put something else on top of it. So I just like wouldn't know the bill was there. And then I start hopping to another credit card and max that out. So I was really scared. And the fear was bad, but even worse than that was the depression, because I was just a lonely guy. I hated myself and I just thought I was a loser. So it got worse and worse and worse. And I was trying to use all the self-help I could. I was setting goals and I never achieved a single one. I was like visualizing what I wanted, but something was just missing. And my rock bottom was when I started drinking alcohol every morning. I'd take I don't know how much it was exactly. It was probably a couple of shots of vodka and mix it with an energy drink. And that was my breakfast. And it helped me just numb away all the emotional pain that I was undergoing. And I was so jaded and bitter about all the self-help stuff I tried that I thought it didn't matter. So it doesn't matter if I drink every morning. I figure it's all just luck, and maybe, work hard and maybe I'll succeed, maybe not. And that's, I mean, there were times before I was drinking when I really seriously thought about killing myself. So I was very, very isolated. So that was kind of like my rock bottom part of the story right there. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm glad you're being so transparent and sharing that with us, because a lot of people go through things like that. I know I've had dark time like that as well, where I was like, oh my goodness, is this ever going to happen? What's going on? And you're right. It always seems like the grass is green on the other side, right? You're always going, well, wow, if they can do it, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do it? What's going on? And nowadays everybody's living the best Instagram life, right? Whether right. Whether they are or not, they're making everybody think that. So, like selfie, I'm having a great time. And so you're sitting there going, man, I'm like pushing the grind here. And then, here we got person selling bubble gum and they're like doing great.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, so you're hit this brick wall, you're at rock bottom. So how did you come out of that? What happened? Just how did you get out of that to come to where you are today?
So I had one teacher that I was learning from at the time, and I was just learning business and marketing from him. And he was, he's thrown in some self-help because he had a coaching group of students who was really digging some self-help teachings from him too. And he was also a devotee of a spiritual tradition called Taoism. And he had all kinds of meditation practices. So he started teaching a bit of the meditation. And I dabbled in meditation, but not really. Like I tried to like sit quietly and stuff like that. Nothing, I don't know. I just, okay, whatever. Just made me feel hazy or something. But he started teaching this stuff and I'm like, this is interesting to me, and it sounded cool. It sounded like exotic and secret. And, he described how people over on the other side of the world would do these meditations and like become enlightened, or just like meditate in caves all day or something like that, or on mountaintops. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. But something with it resonated with me, especially when he mentioned, hey, this is the kind of stuff I did when I went from like starting my business to being successful. It was like the inner work I did. So I was like, okay, well, what the heck? I'll try it. I had nothing to lose. So I kind of fell backwards into a really cool way to create a new habit for myself, because I realized, okay, well, when am I going to meditate? Okay, here's what I'll do. This is my self-dialogue. I'll get up, I'll shower, brush my teeth, do my thing, and then I'll meditate. And it'll be like the first thing I do. And then I'll go drink my alcohol. It's like, I didn't stop. It's like, I mean, this is where I was at. So
meditation and alcohol. I think that's how it's supposed to be.
I know, right? Yeah. It's like, I think I got a new idea for a bar I could start. Anyway, yoga bar. It's not that far from the truth, actually, for a lot of these establishments do. But anyway, but I really did this. And I started with just a minute a day. And I thought to myself, okay, this is really tough. It's tough to build a new habit. But what I'll do is I'll start with a minute. And then I'll add like 5 seconds a day. It's like I won't even notice the difference, but it'll add up over time. So I did that. And actually, after a week or two, I started adding more than 5 seconds because I was, get more confident. And after a little bit, I was like feeling kind of a buzz. It was cool. I was like feeling this. I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like you take that first sip of coffee. It's not like you're jittery, but it just feels good. You kind of woken up a bit and you're just feeling good. So I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. As the weeks went by, I noticed that the good feeling I got from meditating was catching up to the kind of pleasant buzz I got from alcohol. And one day it felt just as good. Like all that happened after I took a drink was I just kind of felt more drunk. And I thought, I wonder if this trend's going to continue. Well, within a day or two, what happened was I meditated and I felt good enough that when I took a drink and it was like, I don't know, 11 in the morning or something like that, or 10 in the morning, I felt a little bit worse because the alcohol was only getting me so like far in terms of like feeling good. So as soon as I was feeling better about myself, it dropped me back down to that same place. So I actually stopped drinking the alcohol in the morning. And it wasn't willpower. I just didn't want to. So, I mean, this is just my story. I don't want to say like it's anyone who drinks a lot, like this is the answer. And I don't really think I was a true alcoholic. I mean, I'll still have a glass of wine or two at dinner. But this was like tangible results. So I kept on going because I'm like, this is like nothing has ever worked for me before. It was only a little bit of results, but it was something. So I kept going. And eventually other people started to comment that there's a difference in me. And I realized, aha, so it's not just in my head. Other people are noticing a difference in my personality, even if they don't know I'm meditating. So I got really kind of like analytical about this whole thing. And that was, this was back in like 2007 or 8 around that time. And my looping, like self-hating thoughts just start to dim away. I start to feel better about myself. And this is sort of like how I turn my inward life around. Now there's a bit more to it because I still had a lot of financial, like, garbage to clean up. Mm-hmm. Meditation didn't make the money fall from the sky, unfortunately. But that's what started to make the difference, because I realized that's the missing piece to all the self-help I was doing, was kind of like going deep into the inner work. And the outer work started to actually work. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, we're going to have to dive into this, right? So,
all right.
Oh man. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, and I'm like, wow, this is interesting. And I'm trying to think of the questions because I've heard this before, and I believe that as well, that, how you think is how you are, right? It's all beginning with mindset. So in your journey, you started doing the meditation, and this is what you probably need to help me with, because I've tried meditating several times. I end up falling asleep. So I don't know. I don't know what.
That happens.
I don't know if it's just, I know I'm very tired because I don't get enough sleep, but I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm supposed to just like fall over and be done. You're supposed to actually, I believe, like free your mind and just kind of get loose, for lack of a better term. So what was it specifically with the meditation that made you start saying, okay, you know what? I don't need to drink anymore. Let me change my mind as far as my personal life, my inner life, my financial life. What were all of these things and the steps that you took to get yourself on the right path?
That's a great question. So what was going on? And I didn't realize at the time that it was going on, but here's what was happening when I was meditating. And then I can get into, and then I'll tell you, like, well, here's how I kind of made it work, including how not to fall asleep. Well, I can't guarantee it, but I think I can give some cool tips, because that's super common. What was happening was, previous to any kind of meditation that I really focused on, I was setting goals, but I was still showing up to try and accomplish those goals as the same flawed, like self-sabotaging me, because I had bad programming from childhood. And I had a lot of experiences of events that gave me low self-esteem. And that kind of programmed me to only get to a certain point before things would fall apart. Like, I never had any financial stability. Even if I had like a good month in business, I still had no stability. So what happened was, when I meditated, was I was able to start bringing up all this old emotional stuff and gunk and trauma that I really hadn't been able to process, that I just kind of buried. And I was finally able to process it. And a lot of it was beneath my conscious awareness. Which is the interesting thing about meditation, is you're not like necessarily trying to think about anything. And yet what'll happen is emotions will come up like randomly. Like, you'll start feeling angry about something. You start feeling like this anxiety. And it's like, what the heck is going on? Or you'll have a memory from like 20 years ago pop up, and you're like, I can't even believe that was on my mind. And now I'm like fixated on it. Or you'll have both the emotion and the memory. And this is what happened to me. And this is what happens to a lot of people when they meditate. And what's going on is, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Because a lot of people think, oh, geez, I'm thinking all this stuff. I'm feeling all this, like, this anger, this anxiousness. I'm supposed to be all like blissed out and zenned out. But it's actually a good thing, because it's almost like an emotional detox. I mean, it actually is an emotional detox. And once that stuff like gets brought up, and you just calmly, sit and face it. And I can get into how to do that. The self-sabotage will start to go away. Like, that's what I start to find, is I start to get more aware of how, wait a minute, let me slam the brakes on my ego here that wants to like build a big business. And let's focus on actually practicing some financial responsibility.
Yeah.
And let's be more patient. And all of a sudden, like, instead of me being able to ignore a bill in the mail, like, I would go crazy if I didn't pay that thing immediately and pay my credit cards in full. So it was actually, it helped facilitate like an emotional growing up process. And what happens when we're emotionally mature, all of a sudden we could be much better at business.
Right.
Now, about like the whole, like, wait a minute, meditating. Okay. I've done that. I've sat there and like paid attention to my thoughts. And then I ended up like, can I have my 15 minutes back? So here's what's cool about the Taoist tradition. They do a lot of meditation, not just sitting, not just lying down, but also standing meditation and even walking meditation. And I started with a meditation done standing. And it's not just like standing where you're like kind of, standing in line at the bank. They do it in a very specific way where it's almost like, picture like a bar stool that's super high. So you're not going to just like squat down onto it. It's almost like you got to like put your tailbone on it, and you have to like unlock your knees a bit and kind of roll your hips forward. That's how you stand. And you also, not only that, but you can hold your arms up as if you're like holding a really big beach ball, and then you tuck your chin down. So what you're doing is it's actually challenging to your muscles, at least at first, which is part of why I started with only a minute a day, because it's like my quads are just baking. It was tough. But what's going on is, if you've ever, you've heard of like acupuncture, where you like stick the needles in.
Yeah.
Well, when you get an acupuncture treatment, what they're doing is they're strategically sticking needles in your body where you've got meridians running through your channels. And actually, there's some science showing that these channels are very real, and they run through your fascia tissue, which is previously we thought it was just tissue that held your organs in place and kind of held everything together like bags around your organs. But it turns out that actually might be the tissue where these meridians run through. So when you're standing like this, it's actually giving yourself like an acupuncture treatment. You're standing in a way where it's like you're opening up these meridians. It's almost like kind of like turning on a faucet, and you're allowing the energy to run through. And this is what is able to dissolve and process this like stagnant emotional trauma that gets buried in your body. So this is why now, and by the way, that's also why you're not necessarily going to fall asleep, because when you're in a standing position, you're instead of like going off and like feeling really tired, you actually have to maintain a greater focus, because you have to balance in this position while at the same time relax your shoulders, relax the tension in your neck, relax the tension in your lower back, and run through the cycle of relaxing your tissues, breathing deeply, staying calm while holding yourself in a position. So it's a very dynamic form of meditation. And with that description, anyone can kind of try it. I actually find that it's more fun and a better experience than sitting for even half the time, because I've got something to do. Like mentally, I've got something to focus on. So my mind, it's like throwing your conscious mind a bone to chew on, so that it's not focused on like, oh, this is a waste, or like, and now I gotta like, I have to check that, I have to reply to that email. You know how it is. It's like,
right.
So it was interesting, because for the first time in my life, I was really addressing all the emotional stuff, but it was without really like trying to do so. It's just what happens when you meditate. So it's super, super cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
So while you're meditating, you're supposed to just let things run through your head. You're not specifically thinking of something, but you're not trying to suppress anything.
Yeah, because if you try to like fight your thoughts and suppress them, I mean, it's a losing battle. I mean, just the old cliche, don't think of a pink elephant, walking around.
Yes.
Yeah, and if emotions and feelings are coming up, it's like, great. They're finally bubbling to the surface. I mean, gosh, that's when they're beneath your awareness, that's when they do the most damage.
Yeah.
That's when you keep running. It's like, oh, why do I keep running into the same situation? Or why do I keep dating the same person over and over? It's because we got this buried wiring. But at the same time, the really cool part is you can direct your conscious mind to focus on things like breathing deeper, breathing slower, seeking out where you feel tense, and just kind of going, let me just kind of relax and let the weight of the tension fall away. And that's a never ending journey, because you can always find some part of your body that's like tense. So that's a way where you can focus your mind on that. And as a result, you're not like, totally unfocused and wondering what to do with yourself. You're giving yourself a really healthy task to do. That's how I put it. Giving yourself a healthy task to do.
Wow. Okay. So as a result of that, tell us how your business flourished, what happened to let you know that, okay, this is working. This is really it. And how did you see your mindset shift from how you were feeling internally previously to the point where you were like, okay, this is working. I'm on the right path. I'm starting to get things are falling in order. Or how did they fall in order? Or did you have to force anything? Or did you, because you were so, I guess, aware of the things that you were unconsciously going through, how did you end up making that change?
Well, that's a great question, and you hit it with awareness. Because my inwardly, I started to turn around. Like my thoughts started getting more supportive. My self-esteem went up, and it was a good thing that happened, because before my business flourished, I went through a period of tremendous chaos. And I think this is actually a pretty universal part of anyone's journey, where things have to get darker before they get better. So what happened was I had another startup at the time, and it was bringing me a monthly income that we were paying ourselves enough that I could pay my rent and stuff like that and cover all my basics. And it was with two partners. We started arguing more and more, and it was a toxic relationship. And I eventually woke up one morning, and it was an online business, internet-based business. And I tried logging into our software, and they had changed the passwords on me. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's how I knew that business partnership was over.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought about, I guess I had some recourse. It would have been tricky because a different partner controlled all the software and even the bank accounts and all that. So that was, by the way, an example of my kind of not much conscious awareness in how to form the business, because I let this other person have all that. Right. But I realized I was working on myself inwardly enough to realize this is ultimately a good thing. It's going to be rough, but it's ultimately a good thing. So that partnership dissolved. They took the money with them. And it wasn't much, but it hurt. And I realized two things. One, I'm going to need to get a job. And number two, I'm probably going to have to go through bankruptcy, because I mean, even the minimum payments on the credit card debt that these debt collectors were hounding me for, mathematically, I just couldn't afford it. So I did go bankrupt, and I wiped off all the debt except for some IRS debt, because I don't know what the laws are now, but at the time you couldn't get rid of all of that. So what happened was I actually went on Craigslist and I found a job spinning a sign on a street corner, which is kind of a weird job to get. But the reasons was I wanted something I could get immediately, and I didn't have to like do too much mental work, because I still want to work in my business. And I realized I don't have the bandwidth mentally to do a challenging job, in terms of like knowledge, and still go home and start a business on my own. That was my perception. And, I didn't want to go back to school again to, start another career that I wasn't passionate about. So the sign spinning gig was actually a really beautiful time in my life, because I was the happiest I'd ever been. I got to listen to audiobooks all day, and I moved into the cheapest place I could find, and I cut all expenses, like all of them. Like there's a multi-year period in my life where I have no idea what shows were on TV. I don't know what movies came out. And to this day, I don't, just because even a few dollars I saved. And that's the first time in my adult life that I was saving more. I was bringing in more than I spent, and I was able to save money. And I saved 10% of my pay every time I got my paycheck. And a funny thing happened. That was how I started to turn things around, because I was finally saving the wealth. Even if it was just like $30 a week, I was actually changing my programming and self-image because I was doing it. Like there was proof right there. I was becoming wealthy. $30 at a time, I was becoming wealthy. And that's how my outer life started to turn around. Just like I started with like 60 seconds of meditation, I started with $30 saving, and it snowballed. And it took several years, but it started to snowball because I was able to build one opportunity on top of another. And I ended up paying the IRS debt with interest, because they tacked on a lot. I think I ended up, probably with all the interest payments, I think I gave them more than if I had paid it on time. So but I made it. And I'm actually other than a mortgage, which, it's debt, but it's you could call it healthy debt.
Right.
Other than a mortgage, I'm actually debt free today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Phew.
Wow.
So yeah, I sleep better. Actually, you know what? I slept better at night, even when I was a sign spinner, because even if I was living close to the bone, bringing in more money than you spend feels way better than if you're bringing in $1 million and you're spending $1 million and 10,000. Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
You've been
yes.
there.
Yes. I totally know. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. That is such an amazing journey. And like I said, I really thank you for being transparent in telling us this, because, a lot of people that they don't want to divulge that, it's not really the highlight of anyone's life to say, what, I filed for bankruptcy and, whatever. But sometimes things are unnecessary. And me being a spiritual person, I always think in my mind, nothing just happens. So even when I'm going through things that are not what the best, or I've made some decision to get myself into a position where I'm like, okay, how did I do this? And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to lead to something, because there's a lesson here I had to learn, or like you were saying, you got to go through the tough times to get to the better times. So what would you tell people, the listeners who are listening today, who may be going through something similar, like they're trying to start a business, or maybe they're just trying to clean their personal life up? How would you tell them to go about it, and what should they do to kind of get themselves on the right track?
That's a great question. I have kind of a philosophy for like inner work, especially meditation today. I put it in the same category as brushing one's teeth, or doing doing laundry, so you got a clean set of clothes, or showering. If you walk outside your front door without brushing your teeth or drinking a glass of water or putting on your shoes, it's not like you're going to go, oh yeah, I really want to put on my shoes. It's like, no, that's just a requirement for going outside. That's just what you do. I consider any whatever kind of meditation resonates with you, whatever brings you results, I consider it on par with that. It's like I will not talk with anyone else before I take care of that, because then I'm not bringing my best self to the situation. And if I don't bring my best self, everything snowballs from there, because there's going to be a chain reaction no matter what. So I always start my day with a standing meditation practice. And it doesn't have to be that specifically, but I would highly, highly recommend whatever someone does. Slow, deep breathing is going to be the commonality in any kind of practice someone does. And it's easy, but it's so easy that it can be easily dismissed as just like, oh, that sounds nice. It's one of those things. No, it's powerful. And I like to put like one hand on my belly, especially when I was first learning this, and one hand on my upper chest. When you breathe, make sure the hand on your belly goes up and down, and the hand on your chest, not necessarily, because a lot of people, when they breathe into their chest, and that's actually the kind of breathing you do when you're stressed or panicked. So why do we have so much like chronically high cortisol levels and so much chronic stress? We're, through the way we breathe, we're actually signaling to ourselves that we're in danger. But when you breathe into your belly, you're signaling that everything's okay. Now, the counterintuitive part is that, or the surprising part, I should say, is that when people first start this practice, if they're not used to it, it can feel a little odd, and it can actually induce a bit of like discomfort. And when I say discomfort, I mean like kind of emotional discomfort, because we're so not used to this. We're not used to actually like taking a full deep breath and giving space in our chest cavity, especially around our heart, so it can induce this feeling like, whoa, this is not good. This is right. But it's actually just a stage to get through, and eventually that goes away. And once you train yourself to actually naturally breathe down into your belly, um, your whole life. It's like kind of up leveling your entire life. And it'll happen in ways that don't seem connected, but little bits of your life will just get easier. So, and that's why I'd recommend this for anyone who's starting, especially starting a business, because as an entrepreneur, you must be more emotionally centered than your employees, than your team, anyone you work with. Like they can have a bit of slack, but you can't,
Right.
Because you're the leader.
Right.
So that's what I recommend, because and the other reason I recommend is because we're in information overload today.
Yes.
Yeah. And when I was at my worst, more information didn't help me. This kind of thing did, which is why I'm also not shy about saying I'm a spiritual person, because when I was down and out, that's what worked when nothing else did. So I have absolutely, no shyness about that today. And before I forget, there's one thing, it was so cool. Earlier you mentioned, like, comparing yourself to others on like Instagram. There's a super interesting book. I think the title is Everybody Lies. And it's kind of a weird title, but the idea of the book is a data scientist actually analyzed social media posts and the content versus Google searches. And what he found is there's such a profound difference between what people are posting about their lives on social media versus what they're privately searching for. And how people actually have a lot of doubt. Everyone has a lot of self-esteem issues, at some point or another, but people are very careful about exposing that on social media. So yeah, I think it's especially in 2021, if you're looking on social media and you're expecting an objective view of reality, please drop that notion. Things aren't as rosy in other people's lives as you think.
Oh, absolutely not. That's something, yeah, I've learned. And and I'm curious. Okay, so you said you had a traumatic childhood. I did as well. Now, when you said you went to college, you moved away, but then you started repairing your life. Did you keep in contact with your family, or do you have boundaries of when you deal with them and who you deal with? How do you deal with that aspect of your life?
Oh, that's a cool question. I kind of kept throughout the years that I went through with all this. I kept somewhat contact, but it was very superficial with my parents. And they did not know I was going through any of this stuff after I moved out until much, much later. But what happened eventually is I started working with a therapist, and his specialty was getting me or getting his clients to have constructive conversations with their parents. Not necessarily so it's like, you could have this Lifetime movie channel, ending with your parents or something like that, because who knows what's going to happen. But no matter how it goes in the conversations with one's parents, it can help resolve a lot of old wounding. And it can help improve your communication, because your parents were your original avenue for communication. I mean, they're kind of your original everything for everything.
Right.
So what happened was I started having more regular communication with my mom and dad, and the therapist actually pushed me to ask about my childhood and what they were feeling and what they went through, which was super uncomfortable for me, which is why he had me do it, or part of why he had me do it. And what happened was I did not get a better relationship with my mother. Okay. It actually, we're probably more distant than ever now. Wow. Which is fine, because it's about how I kind of repaired my old stories and old wounding in the process. Now, my relationship with my father is actually a lot better now, because I was able to really realize that, he wasn't a good parent, but he wasn't necessarily like the worst person in the world. And he'd been on his own kind of journey of growth. So we're actually close. Not to say we're super close. Things are still a little, kind of, we're still focused on our, opening up our emotions a bit more.
Yeah.
But things are a lot better. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because even if things never quite work themselves out with one's parents, that's not, if anyone thinks that's a reflection on them, it's really not. Like I said, it things never actually got better with my mom. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because I did what I could. I did what I could on my end. And yeah, sometimes we're meant to have healthy boundaries. Sometimes we're meant to have very healthy boundaries, very thick, distant, long boundaries. And
Yes.
it's all about like what's best for you,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree because, like I said, I had a traumatic childhood and I have some very long, healthy
Yeah.
boundaries in my life with some people. So yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, you have a book. Let's talk about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. So after, oh gosh, about a decade after I kind of went through the my lowest point, I looked around and I thought to myself, a lot of the lessons I learned, especially like taking something like meditation, really making it practical and work for you, is still like not really well known today. Or and if it is known, it's not. I don't think it's quite taught in a way that people can really get it. So I decided to write a book, and I spent 3 years writing this thing. I mean, I took the first draft and I just threw it out, started over. And the way I ended up formatting it was I wrote a bit of my story, what I learned, and then how the reader can take it and apply it into their own lives, like, really, really granular and immediately. And I just went chapter by chapter, and I tell everything, the bankruptcy, the alcohol, the sign spinning, all of that. And I published it earlier this year. And I'm really proud with what I'm really humbled by how people have reacted, because it's kind of the book I wish I could have given to my younger self.
Yeah.
I can't do that, but the next best thing is how people are just like, taking it and running with it. And it's called The Standing Meditation. And it's on Amazon right now. And you can go to like the website, thestandingmeditation.com, and it'll go right to that Amazon page.
Wow. Sounds very interesting. Man, this has really been a very enlightening um conversation, because that's one of the things that I am working on as well. And I guess sometimes struggle with, because, having a business and trying to do all those things. And sometimes I'm overwhelmed. And sometimes I'm like, okay, this is not working. And then you're thinking, and it's like, okay, I have that. Okay, yes, I can do it. But then somewhere in my subconscious is kind of like, well, can I really do it? You know, am I going too far? So yeah, those things that you need to kind of just work out and get out, because I know it's stemming from deep within, from past
Yeah.
experiences and things. Not that I can't do it or that I doubt my capabilities. It's just it's that old talk and garbage that's in your head that you keep, that comes up when you don't need it to. So yeah, I really love this. If nothing else, I like this episode. It's like,
Hey, if I could reach one person, I'm like, woohoo. So
yeah, it's great. No, and I believe the listeners out there, you're going to take something away as well. Because he has actually given some really good information on how to really just kind of get yourself back on track. And that's what we all need. And especially in today's time, everybody is coming out talking about their mental health and what they're
yeah.
doing to keep themselves in a good space. And I think it's really important. And I'm really happy that the people who have these large platforms are coming out and talking about it, because for so long, I think people kind of kept it like a secret, like, okay, I can't let anybody know that I'm going to therapy, or I can't let anybody know that, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm depressed and I have anxiety. But, we're all human. We're all humans.
Mhm.
We're not perfect, and we have trials and tribulations. But again, we've been kind of taught that, if you can't deal with it, then, you're less than 100%. So I'm really glad this episode, because it's very timely, in today's situation with what we're dealing with in just the world in general. So really love it. Thank you for sharing that and going through it with us.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, and I was just thinking like, I probably would have been able to turn things around a lot quicker if I'd been more honest at the time of what I was going through. It's like, you know, if you might be surprised, and you as in like anyone might be surprised by if you say to someone, like you just said, it's like, yeah, actually, I'm going through some stuff right now. You might be surprised if they look at you and just like, yeah, actually, me too. And you actually have a deeper connection as a result. And if you don't, and if you get that kind of shame reaction or that, well, what's up reaction, well, yeah, they don't deserve to be in your life, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I've had to learn that the hard way, because as I mentioned, I had a traumatic childhood, and it ended up resulting in me making a lot of poor choices and bad decisions that, at first I was feeling very ashamed about. And then as I've gotten older and kind of done my self work, I'm like, you know what? I'm not ashamed of it, because that brought me to where I am today. But then there were people along the way that I shared my story with that really made me feel awful, made me feel horrible. And then I heard Brene Brown talking to Oprah, and she was saying, not everyone needs to hear, gets to hear your story. Not everyone is, like privileged to hear your story, because that's exactly what you just said. If you talk to someone and you're telling them, okay, I'm going through a rough time, this is what's going on, and they try to shame you and make you feel bad, then you know what? They're not worthy of hearing your story. You need to tell it to someone who can uplift you and help you and encourage you, not the person who's going to say, oh my God, you did that? Oh, how stupid are you? So, I've gone through that a couple of times with family and people who weren't family. So I'm very aware of that now, that I don't share my story with everyone. Not everyone gets to, gets the privilege of knowing that Trina.
That's cool.
So yeah, so I'm very glad you brought that up. But Nate, we're going to go into our questions. So hope you're ready.
All right. I'm ready.
Okay. Here we go. Who or what motivates you?
Ooh, that's a great question. Probably what motivates me is, well, first, the who is my wife. Now that I'm married, she's a big motivator for me. Another who is my future students, and anyone I can help. And it's kind of funny because I started that by saying, well, what? And then I just switched to that who, and I'm going to stick with that. And I think that's, wow. I think that's actually probably a big shift in me from several years ago. Now it's my wife and future students, whereas before I probably would have gone off about what's. Yeah, cool.
Great.
Good questions.
Oh, what demotivates you?
Oh, great question. When I fall back into those looping thoughts where I kind of like think, I'm not getting this, or it's like, what's the point? Or I imagine someone like talking down to me. And it's all in my head, but all of a sudden I'm like, that demotivates me. Yeah.
When was a time that something was said or done to hurt you, but it worked out for your good?
Ooh, that's a really good one. There was one time in college where I talked to the wrong person, someone who wasn't worthy. And I mentioned like a business I started and how I wanted to write a book. And the guy said, I think your book will be a failure. And it worked out for the better because I kind of got upset in a healthy way, or at least a healthier way, because instead of believing him, my thought was, this guy's full of crap. So I would hope anyone could take that and run with it. Someone says, I think such and such will be a failure, and they're really talking down to you. Probably the best thing is to assume they're full of crap.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your fear?
My fear is that I am going to keep walking on the spiritual path, and that I'm not going to have the cool experiences that a lot of other people I know do. And that is still a fear I'm working on to this day. It's not a big one. But just being honest, I even wrote that down in a journal today, that was one of my fears. Yeah.
Is there a time when you wish you had done something that you didn't?
Oh, a lot of times. Because I mean, I am like constantly reminding myself that all turned out perfectly. And I really do believe that. But yeah, there are times when I wish I could go back and say to myself, start writing earlier. You love writing. People like your writing. So, stop running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying all these different business ideas and all these startup ideas, and just be a writer. It might not pay off immediately, but you're going to have years ahead of you to build upon that body of work. So I regret not doing that.
Okay. Is there a time that you wish you had not done something?
Oh, of course. Probably every time that I replied to emails too quickly and lashed out at people. Like, yeah. I'm the reason Google now has that thing where you can undo a send, or at least the old me was that. So yeah, I mean, and I think about that to this day. It's like, there are a lot of things I regret, but the most painful ones were where I lashed out at someone. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your definition of success?
My definition of success is if you are doing what really fulfills you without being controlled by your desperation or fear or a need for approval from someone else. And if you're just doing what fulfills you.
Nice. I like that. How do you recharge?
Oh, great question. Going off and being by myself. And that can involve meditation, or it could just be kind of locked in my office by myself. I'm definitely the introvert type, and that's how I recharge.
What are you awesome at?
I'm awesome at telling crazy stories of how I failed and then how I got out of them and writing about it. So I'm owning that. I'm awesome at that, and I love doing it. So
what legacy do you want to leave?
As someone who helped bring like the more esoteric, meditation practices to like lots and lots of people, and helped really break it down and make it practical, especially from Taoism. That's how I'd like to be remembered, is like, oh, that guy who's like, yeah, I read his book and I actually, I listened to what he said, and yeah, it really helped me out. That's how I want to be remembered.
Give the listeners one motivational takeaway.
Here's the takeaway. It's like, we both talked about how we're spiritual people, and the spiritual part of life is very, very real. And working with the energy of your body is a very, very real thing. And we all have access to it. It is everyone's birthright. And even something as simple as taking time out to breathe deeply into your belly slowly and feel the energy can transform your life. That's what motivates me, just knowing we have that power. So I hope it motivates someone else.
So tell the listeners how they can connect with you, get your book, or anything else that you have going on.
The best way is the website, The Standing Meditation. And that's the best way to connect with me too, because I really wrote that and made that as like starting at step 0. Here's how we can take off.
Okay. Well, Nate, thank you so much for being on Trina Talk. I enjoyed our conversation and just your enlightenment and your positivity that you have bestowed upon me and the listeners.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor to be here.
Thank you. If you like Trina Talk podcast, please don't forget to go out to iTunes and rate it 5 stars and leave a review. Also, who else in your life do you know that needs some motivation and inspiration in their lives? Don't forget to share Trina Talk with them. I hope you have a great week. And remember, if you change your mindset, you can change your life. Keep striving, because success is a journey, not a destination.